My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Go Cloud Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the GloCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we are here to answer any tech career questions you may have. Maybe your goal is to become a cloud architect, or an AI architect, or a network architect, or a security architect, or enterprise architect. We can get you there. And if you have a different goal in mind, like an engineering career, we'll still tell you what you need to get there. You know, every day I see people that tell me they have a hard time finding things. And I watch what they're posting on LinkedIn, and I realize that they don't know what they need to know for their jobs. And they're working very, very hard. But unfortunately, most people are learning the wrong things. And as someone that's done 6,000 interviews over the years, as someone that's been trying to hire really great technology professionals for the last 25 years, I can tell you it's a massive struggle to hire them. And no matter how hard we want to hire them, we can interview 1,000 people and often not find a single person that has the skills. But when you give that person the right skills list and they go spend 6 to 9 months and fill those skills, what they're able to achieve is absolutely incredible, but only if you know what to learn. Because sadly, many people don't know what to learn. You know, if you're going to learn medicine, you're going to go to medical school. And it's a pretty strict curriculum of all the things you need to learn as prerequisites and then all the things you learn in medical school. And the jobs are very defined. Our rotations, internships, preceptorships are all defined. So you know what to learn and you're learning it. In tech, you know, sometimes people look, oh, here's a new certification, here's a new certification, here's a new certification. And in the end, they collect almost enough knowledge to almost start in any one of 15 different careers. But junior level knowledge of 15 careers doesn't mean you have enough knowledge to do any one career. So that's why we're here, so you can bring your questions. So we're here for a bit. Bring us your tech career questions, and I think it'll be great. Also wanted to tell you that tomorrow we have a webinar on how to get your first cloud architect job, but you can come for any architecture careers you desire on that webinar. And the reason you can actually do that is it's going to be live. It's going to be on Zoom, and we'll tell you the differences between the cloud architect versus the enterprise architect versus the AI architect. And if you want guidance on other careers, we're still there, live on Zoom, and it's completely free. So I'm pretty excited about that. And our CCNA, we just released today. We released day 2 of the CCNA. My team will drop the link to that and in the curriculum. So just wanted to tell you about those 2 things. Day 3 of the CCNA will be there tomorrow. Mark may have some other exciting things to talk about potentially, but Mark, you want to say hello to everybody? Mark's our Chief Technology Officer, and like me, he's a CCIE.
Hello, everybody. You kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I got all excited about the CCNA because I remember that was my, I'm going to call this my actual introduction to networking. When I thought that, hey, once I get it, I'm going to be this super duper engineer. And then I learned there was a lot more. And then eventually the CCIE really taught me that that was my real introduction to networking when I made To the Peak. But what I really liked about the bootcamp, so everybody knows that we got 2 parts. The first part was a little bit over 10 hours, and then the second part that Mike mentioned is over 8 hours. So we're talking about already over 18 plus hours of free training where you can get your feet wet with networking. And you get it taught by a CCI like Mike. And we're not talking about a CCI that just got coined a CCI. We're talking about he's got decades of experience in networking and brought his architecture skills to that as well. So very exciting. And then, of course, eventually we'll have part 3 coming out, and then you'll have a complete CCA and A training that's going to blow anything else that you can get out there out of the water. But something else that I'm super excited about is for tomorrow. There's going to be a wonderful webinar between Mike, and I call him the GOAT, which is the greatest of all time when it comes to networking. This is kind of like the Michael Jordan, the Magic Johnson, the Wayne Gretzky, the Messi, the Pelé, the Ronaldo, you name it, of what we consider in networking, which is Russ White. He's also one of the original CCDE creators and also the architects when he was working with Cisco. So Mike and him are going to be discussing in regards to, number one, what's going to be the difference between being a distinguished architect and an enterprise architect, because there are some differences between these 2 roles. And then additionally, Mike and Russ White are going to be discussing the history when it comes to architecture, but as well as the evolution of the actual domain and the role itself and what that will mean for you and your career. So that's going to be tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And if you make time for anything this week, this is going to be a must-see for you tomorrow. So make sure you'll be there. We're all going to be excited about that. Aside from that, I'm going to confirm what Mike said as well. It is tough out there to get good advice. There's a lot of information overload when it comes to what you potentially could do with your career. And in technology, one of those unfortunate things is it's not as cookie cutter as you might want to say, as it might be in medicine and in law and business and other type of domains. In IT, there seems to be a lot of bleed over between all the different roles. And of course, also what will be eventually expected to you on the job compared to when you're taking training and also when you're taking certifications. And that is one of the main reasons that the way the actual development program, and if you're interested in learning more about that development program that Go Cloud Careers provides, you can be there tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern time on how to actually get the career. But because of this kind of disheveled little bit of a mess that IT is, that's why the actual development program, the career development program that Mike and the rest of the team put together is structured in a way that actually gets you job ready. So that's going to be one of those differences compared to a lot of the certification training and even some of the accelerated type of college type of training. So it's going to be very exciting if you can make it there tomorrow as well. Aside from that, I'm really excited to see what questions everybody has. This is one of the highlights of our week, to be able to give back to the community, to share with them some tips and some guidelines, or maybe even some type of framework on how they can go about developing the career, especially with the overload of information. So I would say, let's go ahead and let's take a look at our first question here. And let's see if we can answer it for everybody. So we have a question from Dingleman. They're wondering, hey, Mike, I expressed my desire to move into architecture to my manager. He seemed supportive, but he has not talked to me since. Did I make a mistake?
Well, Dingleman, when did you speak to your manager? And I'm curious how you actually spoke to your manager about this, because that's going to be the interesting thing. But if your manager seems supportive and they showed you good body language, how long has it been since they've spoken to you? Because sometimes people are just so busy and I don't know how much they speak to them. If they didn't, I'd find a time to go reach out to the manager and make sure and ask, did I do anything to offend you? Because, you know, you're very important to me and doing a good job here is very important. And I've just noticed I haven't spoken to you in a while. And to make sure there wasn't something that I did. And if there was, I want to fix it because I value you very much. I would try to do that with a soft touch. But sometimes what also happens is you will get the support. But it also will change the dynamic. And here's what I mean by this. If I have an employee that's on my team, that's a good employee, but they want to take a different role in the company, I'll pay for their training. I'll approve the transfer when it occurs. I'll say good things about it to the architecture manager, but you have to take it from my perspective. Now, let's say I have 6 employees. Now that I have 6, I have to focus more love and effort on the 6 people that are going to be on my team because they're the future as opposed to people that are leaving. So that doesn't mean he's not going to be supportive of you. So that's the thing to figure out what's actually going on there. And I can tell you, I remember, and it was incredibly frustrating. I was on a team led by a good friend of mine and a very good manager. And what happens is you're only in most of these companies, you can either be in the top percent, the middle 80, or the bottom 10%. And companies do these kinds of rankings where if you're in the top 10%, you're the ones that are always getting promoted. In fact, if you're like in that top of even the 15%, you're still getting promoted. And if you're in that bottom 10%, you get laid off. And here's the reason. One time when I actually took a massive promotion when I left one department to another department. And my manager said, just letting you know, I'm not giving you that ultra high score on your review, even though you were the best guy on my team this year. I have to give that ultra high score to somebody else because they're going to be with me and I need to motivate my team, not you that you're leaving. And I thought about it and said, I agree. Totally fine. No big deal. I don't care. And then in the next year, they tried to promote me. They said, we were going to promote you because and I'm like, okay. So in the next year, when it came to the promotion, they're like, could you explain this normal average ranking you had in this year? Because that usually blocks a promotion if you've had one in the last 3 years. And I said, yeah, call my old manager. And my manager explained why he had to give a better score to someone else, even if I was the best person that he had said on my team. So yes, please promote me. And then the next time I got promoted a year and a half later, it was the same thing. Went back to that same silly thing, had to have the same conversation. Another promotion after that, it was the same thing. And then at that point, after that, it had been 3 years since I had an average anything, and it was okay. So keep that in mind. But they may still be willing to help you, but at least follow up and find out. And did you ask for any kind of training or support additionally along the way? Leadership training, sales training, executive training. Did you ask him to get involved in helping you plan it like we were talking about? So he would or she would feel like it was important to them and they were actually there. Let me know on that. HG Handel. My question, how can I approach an effective study plan after becoming a Go Cloud architect in networking or security? So if you were to take our program, it would be in steps for you. First, you'd get an email which would notify you of your participation. Then it would notify you where you need to start. And then you'll have to complete that section where you need to start before you'll be allowed to go on to other things. And everything throughout the program is completely guided. So you'll always know where to go. If you were to get lost, you can send Slack messages or ask questions in class, but there's always going to be a time where you need to go. So the effective study plan is really going to be what works for you. When can you do it? For example, when I went to college, I know it sounds crazy. I went to school basically from 7 to 3. I had a 3:30 to 11 job at the ambulance squad. I often got there 15, 20 minutes late, but the chief was okay with it. And then I often worked 11 to 7. So, you know, I was poor. I was trying to pay for my way through school. I had 2 jobs. So, you know, when I did that, the only time I could study was after on the way back from the hospital when someone else was driving the ambulance. I had a little notebook at the time, and it was like this little 386 notebook, and that's how old it was. But I was writing my papers on the way back from the hospital. So I did that. My study plan is, you know, in a firehouse or an ambulance service, there's a lot of downtime. So every time there was downtime, I was writing. Now, most people are not in that situation. So I would say, look at what you can do. And I would also say, look at what you can give up. And here's what I mean. Most of us have a lot of time, HG, but most people spend their time in many places. For example, when I have something big to do, like when I became a network architect, I didn't watch TV for a year. And we didn't have any kind of cell phones or other distractors at the time. I always read 3 books a week in my life, but I stopped reading anything that wasn't related to my CCIE when I learned networking. And I tried to find a way to integrate it into my daily life. If I had 15 minutes, review something. So it's all about what you have. And it also depends on what you know now versus where you need to know. And when you come to us, what would ultimately happen is you would join our program. And then, of course, you had to be given some information. You'd be given some initial things for you to tell us about yourself and tell us also about your actual goals. Because we know your actual goals, our team will guide you on a better study plan that's unique for you. Because I have some people that want to go into enterprise architecture, even though they started as a cloud architect, but they like that more and they need a slightly different plan. And I've got other people that want to move into security architecture or cloud security architecture, and we tune their plan and certification portfolio a little bit, and then they get hired. And it really doesn't matter if it's cloud or it's anything else. We need to know what skills you have of the ones that you need, and the ones that the ones that you will need for the job, and perform a gap analysis between them. And HG, that's how we architect anything. We look at the business vision. Then we figure out how we need that business to operate its business architecture by, of course, looking at its baseline first. Then we baseline the current technology and see, will it get us to the goals? And if not, we create a new architecture based upon what that business needs. And then we do a gap analysis between what they have and what they need. So I hope I answered your question there. If I didn't, please ask again. I really want to help you. It's a little hard in the chat box. So if you want to join us on the webinar tomorrow evening, if you do, I'd be more than happy to see you. It'll be on Zoom and we can have a face-to-face conversation if you like, or ask a deeper question now. But what you have to do is basically figure out the time you have, figure out what you can do it, build a plan of specific, measurable, achievable, results-oriented, and time-based goals, which will teach you. Perform some strategy consulting on yourself to understand your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then when you build that plan, it's just a matter of sticking to the plan and you will be successful. We've got a lot of successful people.
All righty. Sorry about that, everybody. Seems like I'm back. All righty. Let's go on to the next question. Oh, looks like I came just back in time. John Doe is wondering, is it a good idea to learn how to implement the BGP protocol to better understand it? I asked this because I was present for the BGP workshop yesterday and I saw lots of technical stuff. So it depends what career you want to go for.
Yeah.
If you want to be anything from, let's say, a technical support all the way up to some type of engineering, even maybe some design work that you wanted to be doing, in that type of role, you definitely want to learn how the implementation of BGP works. Now, I can't give you specifics in telling you, go learn how BGP is implemented on Cisco IOS or IOXR, or how it's done on Juno OS or Arista or Extreme OS. I can't say that because I don't know what type of vendor equipment potentially your employer might have. They might even just have a Linux box. So you may have to learn what are the commands of implementing BGP on Linux. But I would say is, if you don't know these type of details, you can definitely go ahead and learn how BGP works while still doing the labs. Because one thing that you'll see us many times do is, and especially if you were there yesterday, and let's say you went ahead and you downloaded the networking videos, I think it's almost like 5.5 hours that we have of videos there.
Yeah.
You'll notice that I don't go into the details of why did I type in this command and that command. I don't go through the entire structure of the semantics of a route map in a prefix list. I don't do any of that. But what the actual commands are there for in the implementation that you see is to eventually get to the outcome so that we can explain the end result of things. So that should always be your initial desire when you're trying to learn a technology. The implementation piece may just be a necessity so that you can see the outcome, but it should not be something that you focus on unless, let's say, you're taking some type of networking certification that requires you to either have a hands-on lab that you might perform, or if you're taking anything such as, let's say, a CCNA or a CCNP from Cisco, those will require you also to do some type of, they call them simulates or simulations, where you'll have to know what are the show commands that I might need to type in so that I can see the output of, let's say in this case, BGP or OSPF. So that's where that might come in. Outside of that, it's a side effect that you'll need to go through so that you can see the outcome of basically what you're trying to accomplish with BGP. Mike?
Yeah. And, it all depends, John Doe, is learning how to configure it going to help you. I want to say this. So everybody that I know that's done 1,000,001 hands-on projects, when I actually ask them questions about the protocol, they have no idea how it actually works for the most part. So it depends how you learn. And here's what I mean. So during my CCNP, we did a whole lot of labs. And in those days, the CCNP was 4 exams. And it was a whole lot of labs. And then I had spoken to a recruiter that was actually a networking expert of all things. It was like a side job before I could get hired. And the recruiter said to me, Mike, yes, you have a CCNP. Yes, you have a CCDP. And yes, you've done a lot of labs, but you don't know networking. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, Mike, talk to me about why we might use BGP dampening. What's really going on in all these routers? Why would we need to consider it? And I said, you just turn it on by BGP dampening. That's what I did in my CCNP. And what he wanted to hear was, look, we have these giant networks and these routers have limited CPU and DRAM. And if we keep getting routes coming in and routes coming out, these routers are going to be recalculating so much that effectively they could bring down parts of the internet, especially if what's going through you. And if he said, if we can have the routers look at it and say, we've gotten updates too much, maybe we disregard them for a period of time until things settle down so we don't overwhelm the routers and they'll crash. And I went, And then he said to me, he's like, Mike, how do the packets make it through the switch or the router? I'm like, what do you mean? He said, what are the backplane of these devices like? He said, is it done in hardware? Is it done in software? What are the implications of pushing it on an ASIC or an FPGA versus software? And I went, huh? And then he said, Mike, he said, imagine you're dealing with a wide area network. What kind of, and it's only 1.5 megs, which is far more than most people get, which was true. How are you going to deal with that lack of bandwidth and you're connecting big global communities and all the systems that need to occur? And I went, oh. And then he asked me some questions about BGP, about how I would traffic engineer it. And I had no idea, but I had done lab after lab after lab after lab. And the reason is building doesn't teach you how to design. Now, by comparison, if you actually learned the whole protocol and you understood how all of it worked, and then you wanted to build it, sure, that might actually feel good. Then you can, while you're building it, you can debug it and say, oh, init, open, connect, you get the point established or whatever, and you can see that. And maybe that helps reinforce it. But I'll tell you, you give me someone that's done 1,000,001 hands-on projects, 99% of the time they don't know how to do it. I mean, they don't know how to design it because learning how to build it generally doesn't teach you how things work. So is it a good idea? I don't know. It can't hurt. It's not going to hurt you in any way, shape, or form. The bigger question, John Doe, is where should you be spending your time? And if you're a kinesthetic learner who learns by doing, feeling, that kind of thing, yeah, go configure it. But if you can see it in your mind and you can see all these messages like I can, don't waste your time configuring it. Because if every minute you're spending configuring it, you're not focusing on other skills that you might actually need, like executive presence or business acumen or leadership, or maybe even thinking about what you can do with BGP, what kind of problems it can solve, how can you offer new opportunities to your clients. That's the actual skill. John Doe, I say this, and there's another question on cloud projects. I'm going to give you an example. Well, even the CCIE exam, which I would say is more of a design engineer certification, here is what you need to think about. No one has a problem configuring the routers. No one. In fact, Cisco gives you the configuration guide when you're there. The problem is the way they created that exam, and I'll give you an example without going into an exam. They might tell you one of your areas in OSPF needs to be able to accept some routes that came in from BGP that are going to be redistributed into OSPF, and that area cannot have type 5 LSAs. But that area can also not have needs to have a type 1, a type 2, and a type 3 LSA, but nothing else, or something like that. They can do that. And they need you to know, okay, wait, what does that mean? Type set, I can't have a type 5 LSA, but I have to have some external subnet that I need to route in. I can only have type 1 and type 2 and type 3 LSAs. okay, this is going to be a not so stubby area. But you need to figure out that it's not a not so stubby area first. That's why people fail the CCIE exam, because the whole exam will be scenario this, scenario this, scenario this. And I can talk about this because they don't do it anymore. In mine, when I took it, what they made you do in the old days, it was frame relay, is they made you use a multi-point interface out a single port. And if you knew anything about distance vector protocols, which of course they would force you to use, they have something called split horizon that doesn't enable you to take a route in and then advertise it out on the same port to prevent loops. So then they would say, well, make sure you can make routing work across this multi-point interface. And you can't use sub interfaces because they wanted to make it break. And you needed to know at that point, if I disable split horizon, we're going to have routing loops all over the place with all of our route redistribution. So what do we have to do to block it? Where are we taking the routes in? Which route should we take in and which route shouldn't we? That's the challenge. Configuring this, disabling split horizon, that's nothing. It's knowing what to do. So I can tell you that I spent probably 1,000 hours of labs on the 1,000 hours of lab time for the CCIE and about 2,000 hours of reading time. I think I would have been better served bumping it up to 2,500 hours in reading and study time and knocking the lab time down to 500. Because in the end, configuring it was really, really easy. It was knowing what to configure that was the monster challenge. Mark, you took the exam. Did you feel similarly? Because you might feel differently depending upon where you started.
Yeah. So to me, there is a strategy to taking the exam. And one of the strategies that you have to be really good at, or let's call it actually a skill set at this point, is time management. Now, to be really good at time management on the exam, you have to be quick at configuration. So there is not much room for error when it comes to that. So that's part of the CCIE exam where you do have to practice the configuration so that you don't spend a lot of time thinking of them. But I'm going to give you an example from my exam without going too far into the details to give you an idea of what Mike just said as to regards to what you might see in the real world. So even though it's not a real world exam, it's not best practice anything, but just so you understand, my lab was super heavy on BGP. I mean, ridiculously heavy on BGP. I wish there was actually more OSPF or something, but it pretty much was mostly BGP with multiple service providers. And I remember specifically at one point, all they gave me was a screenshot and they said, make the routing table look like this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. At that point, I tell you this, John Doe, I was not thinking about what command I need to type in, what command possibly might need to be there. I was actually trying to understand what design they were going for. How would I have to change my current design to accommodate what they were trying to do? And for me to be able to do that, I had to understand what I already had done and now the outcome. And in the end, you know what it was? It was as simple as my autonomous system is not supposed to be a transient or transit autonomous system. So in the end, all it was an AS access list that I need to put in there to make sure that I only ingest nothing that has my own autonomous system in the path. So this was basically just like a caret sign and the dollar sign, which is an empty path. But here's the thing with this. The commands were trivial at that point because the assumption is going to be made that you know the commands. But what was really challenging there was this understanding. Do you know what it means not to be a transit autonomous system?
Yes.
Do you understand that to be able to accomplish the particular design, it's going to require that you filter out anything that might kind of loop back to you and then cause you to between that transit. So that the understanding of the protocol and how the protocol functions was paramount in that case. It wasn't really the configuration. But I'll be honest, and Mike probably feels the same way, is if I didn't know the commands, for an exam like the CCIE, which is a implementation exam, that would have put me in a pickle too if I didn't know that. So, but I would definitely agree with Mike that you should know the concepts and the theory a lot more than just the implementation piece of it, because you can always look up some code or some commands that you need to type in. Like, for example, I didn't remember every single line that was needed to configure a dynamic VPN tunnel, DMVPN. That's what Cisco's proprietary type of technology or solution, where they can have like next hop resolution, everything kind of plugged together. I didn't sit there and remember everything. I can look that up in config, I can copy paste, I can make change, I can throw it in. The more important part is, do I understand how all the different solutions work together to accomplish a particular outcome? So even for a CCIE exam where implementation is paramount, I would say knowledge. Knowledge is key, and then understanding how eventually that knowledge interworks with everything else. That's why they actually call it the inter-network expert, because you got to understand how does everything fit together and what are the repercussions of changing something here and there. Like Mike said, if you're importing outside prefixes through OSPF, not only do you have to understand what particular type of area you require, you also need to understand, when I ingest those prefixes, how does this propagate across my entire OSPF domain? So we're not, again, talking commands. We're talking about, do you understand the concept, the theory, what happens as you manipulate or you engineer traffic to accomplish a certain outcome? Hope that gives you a little bit of additional detail, John Doe.
And John, I want to give you the additional perspective, because Mark and I share very similar philosophies on the CCIE. Cisco actually has an architect exam. It's called the Cisco Certified Design Expert. And there's no configuration on it. They give you a business scenario. You have to create an architecture. You have to present it back to them. And they're going to interrogate you on why you made the architectural decisions that you did. It's sort of the way people defend their dissertation with a PhD. And that's an architecture exam. And at that exam, they don't care if you can configure it. But the level of complexity they're going to give you in your design is going to require you to have a complete knowledge of how all this stuff works. Not how to do it versus how it works. So, John, it always depends on the career you're looking for. For me, I see the concepts. I really do. And I learn the concepts, and then it's all easy to me. But we all learn differently. So we gave you two perspectives on it. Let's bring in the next one, Tyrone.
Let's take a look what we got. From Raja Khan, for someone transitioning into an architect career with an interest in networking, is pursuing a CCNP advisable? You've mentioned that business knowledge and strategic focus often provide greater value.
So I'll start with that. I'll have Mark give his perspective as well. I do like the CCNP. The CCNP, if your goal is to become an architect, is what I call bait, in that it looks really good on your resume. Professional certifications tend to look well. You will have some knowledge on the way these protocols work at that level, which will definitely benefit you. And there'll be a lot of hands-on engineering things, which will not. So if you really wanted a certification for network architecture, I'd probably get the CCDE and focus everything on the Cisco Certified Design Expert, because the CCNP is focused on engineering and the CCDE is focused on architecture. And I'd probably go that way unless I was looking for bait. So the CCNP on your resume would definitely get you an interview, but it's probably not going to get you to pass the interview. It'll get you maybe 30 or 40% of there. So the other question is where do you spend your time strategically? We have to also look at what you've actually done in your life and what you actually know. And for example, if you've been in networking for 6 years, I don't care if you've got any certification. If the things that you have on your resume look right, for example, designing, if you're talking about peering with 4 ISPs and load sharing, now I'm getting interested. If you're talking about designing an enterprise network that has 10,000 nodes, I'm getting very interested. If you're talking about designing IP video solutions, I'm getting very interested. So all that, I don't care if you've got a certification in the world, it's meaningless to me. In fact, I almost prefer you don't. Because if you've got that kind of skill and you understand that kind of design and you understand that business implications, you're focusing on exactly the skills that you need to for the job. Now, if you don't have anything that looks good on your resume right now in the past, and you get a CCNP, which you can do relatively easily in today's world, and you actually learn the material, That'll get you the interview because it's like, whoa, wow, I got a CCNP. Maybe the person's got a TOGAF 10. Now they're starting to look really attractive to you on paper. And then you get brought in for the interview. And at the interview, that's when it's based upon your executive skills, your presentation skills, your sales skills, your CXO relevancy, your emotional intelligence. Those things become really critical there. So we've got both sides of it. You still need the technical knowledge. And Raja, I hope you can join me and Russ tomorrow. You still need the technical knowledge, but it's not the how-to. It's the what and the why. If we're going to create an environment and we choose to create a hub and spoke architecture, what benefits does that give us? Like simplified routing, but does it now not create single points of failure? So now if we're hub and spoke, do we create multiple hubs and multiple spokes? And what do we do in environments where there's a lot of traffic between two sites? And now how does that impact our routing? And how does that impact the way we design our routing to create that's where it gets complicated. And that's actually the job of the architect. What can we do to limit the risk here? What can we do to limit the impact of this over here? Now there's a new AI project. What does that mean? What do we need to do performance-wise? Now we've got voice and video. What do we need to do quality of service-wise? Not doing it, but I need you to think. It's more about thinking about the implications. So if you throw a stone in a pond and you see those waves that ripple out of that, that's the architect piece. Thinking about what happens when someone does something, running those what-if scenarios, thinking about the whole end strategically. The CCNP is much more of a tactical how-to certification. I love it. I have a lot of my students getting it if they want to become network architects, and then we actually teach them the architecture inside of our program of how to design things. How does BGP work? How would you design an addressing plan? Lots of subnetting. And Mark put a lot of content into VXLAN and all these BGP and the data centers and things like that. And on that, and I know I have a ton of networking things that I've taught over the years. So we cover it that way. So I hope that helps. I really wish you would join us on tomorrow's webinar. Ask your questions. And that way, if you want, you can send me your LinkedIn profile and I can give it a quick look and look over it and say, you've got this, you've got this, you've got this. These are the gaps you're going to need. And if the gaps you need are inexpensive, I'll point you to an inexpensive place. If the gaps are things that we did, maybe you want to join us, but at least you'll know what to learn and where to go. Mark?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because on one end, the question that I would ask myself, what am I trying to get out of taking that certification? If I want to take a certification, and let's say my end goal is still I want to be an architect, there's maybe a handful of certifications that have architect in the title, but it's more like a framework on how to get certain things done. So that's a little tough right there. But here's the thing. Let's say you want to be an architect and you want to specialize in networking. So you want to kind of create like a T shape, if you think about it, something like this, right? Where you're going to be broad, meaning you'll learn a little bit about enterprise architecture, such as, of course, how business works, how security works, how cloud works, how some of the voice and the video stuff works. Then that T side, let's say that's going to be your networking. This is where you want to specialize in. The question there is, are you good enough of a learner where you can isolate the books and the additional technical references that you may need to read, and then work on your own to either whiteboard them to kind of create a visual image of what you're learning, and then if required, do some labbing. If you can do that, then going for certification doesn't hold a lot of merit in that sense. It doesn't give you a lot of payback for that. But if you're the person that says, I want to transition over time into the architect role, which allows me not only to build up my technical competency, but more importantly, my business acumen, as well as my emotional intelligence, my leadership skill, and it allows me a little bit of this additional time to practice my presentation skills as I start whiteboarding and trying to understand how these concepts work and explaining that. And you require more structure, then certifications can have a place. But then the question is going to be, how much of a network specialist do you want to be? Because a CCNP might be good enough, and then you might couple it with, let's say, something like a CCDE. Now, I personally, I'm not going to advise go for the CCD immediately. And the only reason I say that, there's maybe a handful of people that have that ability to just look at something, understand it in the vacuum of what it is, and then be able to go and do it. And with the CCDE, we're talking about a swath of technologies that span across all the different domains. So it depends on how comfortable you're doing that. If you're going to go down the CCMP route, because you want structure in your learning, again, we don't say don't do it, but make sure that it also helps you get towards a larger goal, the architecture, right? Is it going to get you those interviews? It's going to make you look good, your branding from that perspective. Yeah. But be prepared that, and I have the list in front of me, you're definitely at least going to have to take the Encore exam. So that's going to be your main exam. It's going to give you a huge overview of anything and everything enterprise networking. Then what I would advise you do is they have one called the Implementing Cisco Enterprise Advanced Routing and Services. Now, this is basically what used to be the route exam back in, I don't know how many days it was, I think 2015 to 18, 19, wherever they stopped it, but it was a three-part exam. There you're going to learn your BGP, you're going to learn more of your prefixes. I would have to see, I think you learn the basics of MPLS and MPLS VPNs. You're definitely going to go a lot more in depth into OSPF on how that functions, and then additional services such as VPNs and so forth. So I would say at minimum, you need those. Now, if you're aspiring towards the architect, something that you can do is take the Design Cisco Enterprise Networks exam. So this is going to give you a little bit now more of this idea of the mindset of an architect. Now, if you couple those three together, then I would say, okay, that is not something bad. That is something that's going to give you that structure so that you can move towards eventually that goal of becoming a full-time architect. But again, it depends on which way you learn better. And in the end, can you spend the time and the money in acquiring those certifications? That's also something you need to keep in mind. And assuming you pass it on the first time too, otherwise you have to pay a few times. So depending on what your goal is, if you can read, definitely go ahead and read, learn that way. If you need more structure, something that keeps you accountable, something that at the end of the day, you want to say, I have something to show for. Yeah. Certifications perhaps could be a route, but that's going to be up to you. And I'm actually thrilled that you asked, Raja, because when I started this journey in networking, I didn't know any better. I thought the only thing that existed was certification. So I went down that route. But for everybody listening to this and eventually watching the replay, just understand is you're not required to do certifications. As a matter of fact, you can just buy the book and learn from the book. If you need the hands-on, practice the hands-on. There's plenty of examples in the books that you can practice on. And of course, there's more books. We discussed yesterday on the BGP workshop that picking up a book such as from Sam Halabi in regards to internet architecture, that's going to give you a wonderful idea of how things work. And at the same time, if you sit there and you follow along how Sam has the diagrams kind of spread out and you start whiteboarding him, trying to understand the workflow, you can eventually also get to this point where Mike is, where he just sees these things in his mind now. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have to really go and whiteboard them. He does it for your guys' benefit, not for his own. So those are other avenues that you can take from that. So let me know if that gives you somewhat of an idea. If you have a follow-up question to this, put it in the chat. And then, of course, if you want to have a little bit more of an in-depth discussion, we can always have that tomorrow if you want to be there. Just let us know if you're going to be there, and then I'll put a little bit extra time aside and I'll join a session. We can have a little bit of a discussion between the three of us and see if that's really something you do want to do and how we can get you there. From Freedom Lands, ooh, nice one. It says, are you two saying that reading is more important than lab work? I am aiming to be a cloud architect.
Well, Freedom Lands, you could do not a single lab in your entire life and get hired as a cloud architect. And you could do 1,000 labs and never have the skills to be an architect. Yep. And that's the reason why I've got people with 10 and 20 years of engineering experience, including cloud engineering experience and DevOps engineering experience, that need to be retrained to be an architect because it's a different set of skills. So let me show you something from a technical perspective. Tyrone, maybe increase the size of this. So everyone can see it. Now here, I entered basically 3 commands: router BGP 65313, which identifies our autonomous system. I added a neighbor 192.168.1.1 to another autonomous, well, hold on, never mind. I don't want to make this IBGP. To an external autonomous system. And then apparently in these days, you have to add this command to activate the neighbor. This is configuration training. Now, here's the bigger issue. I could teach you to do that in 10 minutes. I could even teach you all the enhanced commands in a day. But what is the real issue there? When I entered those commands on the router, what happened? Let's say I added that in Japan. Now, all these routes come into that router in Japan from the autonomous system. What I'm more concerned about is how do these routes propagate across our network? What I'm also might be concerned is I didn't filter any routes out. So what does that mean? Could I become a transit autonomous system later because I didn't filter any routes in or out? Now, when we put those commands in, now those commands are going to affect new routes, which might mean we have suboptimal routing or different routing throughout our systems, potentially speaking, which could potentially affect the voice system in London. Or this could affect the routing control plane, which can affect someone else in Dubai. And I need you as an architect to be able to game the what if scenarios. If we add BGP here and take in these routes, what is that going to mean? If we add this system, this new AI system, what does that mean for our network? Does that we need lower latency? Do we need more throughput? Do we need more storage to sort this environment? Do we need object storage? What kind of mapping and reduction? So I need you to think about all of how it fits together. But I don't care if you know how to configure it. You don't need to know how to configure it. Most of the best architects I know out there don't configure anything. I asked David Lithicum for fun when the last time he touched technology was, and he said, well, when I left engineering 30 years ago. And he asked me, when was the last time you touched technology? And I said, about 25 years ago when I left engineering for architecture. So I have no problem with you knowing how to configure, just like I have no problem with you knowing how to code, just to realize it's going to have nothing to do with your job. Nothing. So then it brings us to this question, do you learn someone else's job, which won't make you better at your job, or do you focus on mastering your job? That's really where we're going from. Now, I can tell you this. I focus on learning my job. The clients that I have that focus on learning their job do really, really well. I will tell you when it comes to trying to interview people after the last 30 years, it's near impossible for me to find somebody. Near impossible for me to find somebody. And they all know how to configure. And especially in the cloud world, people want to go on an interview and they want to show me their cloud projects. And I say, why are you showing me your cloud projects? And they say, I built this. And I say, yeah, but that's not the job. Can you show me a thought leadership document you would have written? Have you ever responded to an RFI, RFP, RFQ? Tell me about the last time you presented to the board. Tell me how you would sell something that's this. How do you deal with a frustrated customer? How do you repair a customer relationship? What does it take to develop a relationship with your customer? But I know how to configure this. I wrote a Python script. And I say, yeah, but we architects don't write Python. And at the end of the day, Freedom Lands, what I need you to understand is 70 to 80% of all cloud architectures are total failures. I'm going to say this again. 70 to 80% of all architectures are total failures. That means companies are spending money and getting nothing behind. So companies are becoming much more keen to say, I need more business skills. I need more leadership skills. I need more executive skills because we got to get some return on our investment from these expenses. I don't need another techie. I hope that will explain to you that makes sense. And please, if not, feel free to ask more. And I'm passionate on this only because I've seen so many people, they do so many things, they learn everything. But if after you learn it and you want to build it real quick, it's not going to hurt you. Potentially, it might even reinforce something that you already learned. But just doing projects and not reading is meaningless because you're not even going to learn anything from it. You're just going to learn which boxes to click or which commands, and that's not going to be part of your job.
All right. So, Freedom Lands, think of it this way. What is the role that you want? Now, you said cloud architect. One of the main skill sets that you will require as an architect is the ability to read and comprehend and the ability to write. Because you're going to be looking over, now, depending on what type of exactly role as a cloud architect you might be kind of like a cloud architect / solution architect. Just depends on the company, kind of like how they have things. But what if you have to look at a request for information? What if you have to reply to requests for proposals? Those will require you to be able to read all the pages that you might get and then be able to comprehend it and draw out the details that you can now pivot either a holistic solution, such as an enterprise solution, or just a more like a network application solution or something in that sense, or in your case, a cloud solution. All of that will require you to do with the ability to read and to write. Labbing has nothing to do with that at that point.
No.
But I will tell you this. Let's say there is some type of hands-on work that you can do, and there definitely is. One of them would be practice your writing, practice your delivering of a solution on how it fits the customer. Practice on how you're going to draw out the points. What are the points? Why would they be important for you to pay attention to? And why would they not be important to, right? Write it down, write your pros and cons, your pain points, your pleasure points for the customer. And then something else that you can do, and this is that I recommend highly, draw out, start practicing some of your whiteboarding skills, your artistic skills, so that you can show the customer. Because remember, we are visual creatures. Even if we like to learn through hands-on or audible or something like that, we like to visualize things. And the customer wants to do the same. They want to see the solution come alive. So you want to be able to whiteboard things out, draw them out, show the customer what is it like. And the nice thing about doing this compared to immediately jumping into the commands is, number one, we don't do really well with just remembering words. We generally work through connections, associations. And that's where drawing things out is actually going to improve our learning comprehension and at the same time, our way that we can deliver it to the customer. If at the back end, for some reason, let's say you're the brave one and you wanted to learn something specific in regards to how to make private lines work with the fancy term direct connections, the direct cloud connections now, and you just wanted to learn some of that technology, get a little hands-on, then knock yourself out. Get EVE-NG, get GNS3, get Cisco Model Labs, whatever you want to. Yep. Maybe log into one of the cloud portals and practice that if you want to. But understand that should be a distant 100 on your list, not a distant second, third, or fourth 100 on your list, but rather practice all the other things we just said. That's what we're saying. That reading aspect is going to be a lot more important than you being able to remember if it's going to be routed BGP, the autonomous system number, the neighbor, the IP address, as well as the remote autonomous system. Then you go into your address family, IPv4, IPv6, and then what you do is you type in the neighbor, the IP address, and then you activate it to make sure they actually turn it back up. So the reason I remember that and Mike remembers that is because we have done it so many times, it's irrelevant at this point. That needs to be practiced. So just keep that in mind. It's really the other skill sets, not the actual learning the commands or the building aspect of it. It's everything else that comes with the job of an architect, and that is to be able to understand what the requirements are, apply to a use case, and then be able to demonstrate it to your customer as to regards to what the benefits of that solution will be. Glad that makes sense, Freedom Lens.
Yeah.
Okay, let us take on the next question from Cloud Doctor. They're wondering which soft skills have been most important in your success as an enterprise architect. How do one develop these skills and how can I start practicing them now? So let's start with what are the most important skills that you've found to be successful at enterprise architecture?
Cloud Doctor, excellent question. Here's what I want to do. I actually want to tell you a lot of the things we do as as enterprise architects, and then afterwards I'll explain the skills that we need for each one. So one of the things that we do is develop and maintain enterprise architecture frameworks. So this means some good knowledge on writing things down, understanding various frameworks, which means a whole lot of reading, and looking how you can organize that company's things that they do into an enterprise architecture framework like TOGAF. Now, another thing that we actually do is we create technology roadmaps that are going to be aligned with business objectives. So what does that mean? First, we need to find those business objectives. And that means we need to go to the C-suite. And we need to speak C-suite, CXO level communication. So we have to be able to speak to the executives in a language that they care about. Now, at the same time, if we're going to align something with business objectives, if we don't have business knowledge or business acumen, We can't do it. So another thing that we will do is we will analyze current systems and infrastructure. Now, that typically is not something the enterprise architect does, but what we actually do is we're literally speaking, we are going to the client, and when we're at the client, we're going to be leading a team of people. The team of people are going to baseline the system. Some network engineers will baseline the networking. Some data engineers will baseline the data systems. Some security engineers will baseline the current security systems. Some DevOps engineers will look at DevOps processes. Some cloud engineers potentially are going to look at the way things are built on the cloud's performance and its limitations like that. So again, this goes back to good leadership skills, because you're not going to be doing it. Now, we do a lot of designing of future state architecture models, which is how we want the business and the technology to operate in the future. So this means you need to understand strategy consulting, which is why we teach all these skills in our program. Obviously, you need to understand strategic thinking, which we just talked about our students last night in our enterprise architect program, and the kind of strategic questions you need to ask the client to get this information. So this goes back to executive communication skills, but now you're not going to be taken seriously if you don't get seen like an executive. So you're going to need a lot of training in executive presence or gravitas. Again, we provide these trainings, but you need them from somewhere. Now, at the same time, we're going to be doing a lot of stakeholder collaboration and a lot of stakeholder management. So you're going to have to understand things that stakeholders care about, how to find the things that stakeholders care about, and how to be able to communicate them in a manner that gets to as many things that they want. And if you want your project to be successful, you're going to have to get those stakeholders to buy in and basically help sell it to the rest of the team, or the people that are working for them use the system. So that also means you're going to need extremely good sales skills and lots of stakeholder management skills. Now, one of the things we do is manage enterprise architecture documentation. That means we're going to have extremely good writing skills, because we're going to have to be very clear. We're going to be conducting gap analyses between what we have and where we need to go. And that's a big thing that you do architecture-wise. So that means we're going to have to understand what we have, being able to lead the team to get us the information, and have to create the team to create the new design, and then figure out what the difference is between them. Okay, we need to do this on the network. We need to do this security-wise. We need to do this here. So we do a lot of that. We lead architecture review boards, often as an enterprise architect, our cloud architects, our security architects, our network architects, our application architects, our AI architects, etc. They're going to come to us with a solution. And we have to evaluate the impact of that on our business. So that means things like an impact analysis, for example. Now, we have to do a lot of facilitation of communication between the various business units that may be siloed, and get the systems to work together and get the people to use them. So again, we're a lot of that. Now, instead of trying to cut the cost out, we're more looking at how to design scalable and agile solutions for the clients while managing cost, as opposed to just trying to remove cost. Now, we're also going to be dealing with a lot of vendors. In an enterprise, you may have 200 to 1,000 different applications, and they often come from many different vendors. So you're going to have really good vendor management skills. Now, you're going to be doing a lot of strategic planning so you need to understand how to act like a security, I would call it a strategy consultant. So we provide training for that as well. You're also going to have to manage the IT portfolio and prioritize the investments, which is your business acumen, where you're going to be able to calculate the expected value of each opportunity and be able to show management of all the places where they can spend the money. Yours is the one to deliver the best return on investment. Now, we will be doing architecture maturity assessments. We'll be looking at the organization. We'll be looking at the people. We'll be looking at the processes. We're going to look at the sophistication of the people. Could they even handle a new architecture? Do they have the skill set? So we do a lot more, but these are the types of things that we do. That's the predominant thing that we're doing. So this means executive skills, leadership skills, sales skills, executive presence, emotional intelligence, executive writing, gravitas, executive presence, and these are really good skills. They're also very expensive skills to learn. I know my training was probably my MBA was about $60,000 or $70,000, and that was cheap, but it was also 20 years ago. And then after that, I probably had about $100,000 of training that my company paid for in executive presence, sales, And that's why we train these and we put it into our training program, because people won't be very successful without it. And I don't think anybody has the resources to do what I did or Alonzo did to get them. So that's what we teach and the way we teach it.
Yeah, and I'm going to confirm with Mike on this. I would say business skills. And then the primary skill on the business is, for me, leadership as well. The reason is because pretty much a wide swath of skills fall under leadership. Mike, if I'm off on any of them, correct me. But one of them would be communication skills, which also include active listening, knowing how to listen, how to communicate with people. Then you're going to have this idea of emotional intelligence, being aware not just of yourself, but of others, how to deal with them, how to deal with different situations, different people. You're also going to have to learn under leadership skills how to delegate. That's one of the aspects of being a leader, is knowing not to take everything on, but giving it to the right people. Now, what are the right people? Well, you're going to learn how to build a team of the right people, which at the same time, now you're going to have to know what is going to be eventually the goal and the mission of what you're trying to accomplish. So there's a lot of these things that fall under leadership that I would say are paramount. And Mike mentioned also the MBA. Now, getting a master's in business administration could be a very crucial step. But like myself and many others, you kind of wonder, is really spending, $100,000 or more at a reputable school on an MBA the best way for me to invest in my career? Or are there more financially sound ways of gaining that knowledge and still be able to drive towards becoming an architect? And that's where really my personal opinion, and many of our students that have signed up for the enterprise program as well, have said that the training that we have provided in that enterprise program has not only saved them money, but also has compressed all the information. And when I mean compressed, we have compressed it, not meaning that you're getting just little bits and pieces, but compressed all the important aspects of business administration into one particular program that's going to get you those skill sets. And then the nice thing about it is, with an MBA, you're just focusing on the business. But within the program itself that Go Cloud Careers provides, is you're not just getting the business. You're getting all the additional training for all the other subsequent skills that you will need to know to be successful at it. And then, of course, we do sprinkle in the technology. Now, as an enterprise architect, though, the technology is probably going to be the smallest aspect of what your job is going to pertain to, but still a very important aspect for you to at least have somewhat of a handle on, so that you can then take all that business knowledge that you're going to accumulate and become what truly an enterprise architect is supposed to be. And that is really a leader and also a bridge, not just between the business and the tech, but you're now becoming the bridge between everything business, all the different departments, because you're going to be the go-to person that everybody's going to be speaking to. And you're going to be trying to put all that together so that you can put together a holistic, not just solution, but business plan that the stakeholders eventually can buy into, if you have sales skills and presentation skills, so that you can move the company into, and I know this has been a little bit more of a gimmicky work, but truly this is fitting into an aspect where they can have true digital transformation, so that they can have better income, that they can have better return on their investments. And more importantly, if you're working with a company that provides a product or service, they can really serve their customers a lot better when they have somebody like you that understands the overall picture of business and how we can apply that to the business itself and also the customers that you serve. So for me, it is leadership skills as well. All right, let's take a look at our next question. And I believe, all right, so there's going to be a couple of questions here, Mike. I think 2 or 3. We'll take them one bit at a time. So the first part is from Neptune Michael. My current background is designing and implementing data solutions. I am interested in transitioning into cloud architect. However, I am not thrilled about going too deep into networking or BGP. Okay, let's go ahead and get the second part up. Please, Tyrone. And it goes on, can I transition into a cloud architecture or cloud architect role without getting Cisco networking certifications? So,
okay, so first,
go ahead, Mike, and then I'll give my take on this one.
First, you could be kind of cloud architect with 0 certifications. I've had students that have had none. Now, I will tell you, Michael, when you asked that question, I did check your LinkedIn profile. We probably want to put 2 or 3 good certifications on your resume, 2 or 3 of them. And we're going to want to get rid of the I did this online course and completed it, because we want to show the stuff that's big about you, and we want to minimize the small things about you. For example, don't put typing on your resume. Don't talk, I took this 30-minute class online, or this 2-hour class online. We're going to highlight the big stuff for you. Now, what is that? Whatever you want it. Do you need to know networking? Yeah, you need to know some networking, because if the network doesn't work, nothing works. And the network is at the heart of everything. It's at the heart of availability. A lot of the security is done on the network, and the performance constraints are often from the network. So yes, you do need to know networking. Do you need to pass any Cisco certifications? No. Do you need to learn how to configure any of this? Absolutely no. If you can learn BGP, and honestly, what we did yesterday, the reason we called it BGP for Cloud Architects is if you could master that, that's all you need to know as a cloud architect on BGP. Now, Mark and I would go to 2 weeks of training from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for 2 weeks, and that still would be, for a network architect, that's just about the beginning. But for a cloud architect, it doesn't matter. Remember, we're a generalist architect. So learning subnetting, yes. Learning supernetting, yes. Understanding what aggregated routes are, absolutely critical. Learning what type of wide area network to choose. Why would I choose an IPsec tunnel over a private wire, private line? And what are the differences that I get out of each option? And which is going to be better for my client for this business case? That you need to know. But you'll never need to configure anything. But you do need to understand some fundamentals of networking, because without it, Michael, here's the kind of thinking I'm going to need you to have. I'm going to get a call. And the reason they're going to call me is we're bringing in an architect because we have really bad performance of this particular application or these particular applications, and we need a solution. Now, the application people will say, oh, it's the application, the code's inefficient. The server people are going to say, well, let me check if it's CPU utilization, DRAM, or disk performance. The networking people are going to go and check the network. Is there any latency at any point? Is there any constraints on the network at some point? Then we're going to look at the storage. We're going to have to approach low performance, and figure out what all of its causes are. So you need to know enough, just enough, to be able to get by. So the bigger question here, Michael, is the leadership skills. And I know you're training in them, and I know you're getting them. And the reason that is, it's not practical for anybody to know all of these things. It's just not. We're going to have people that come in from a data background, like my friend Praveen, who's now working as a cloud architect after our training. And guess what? He's got an expertise in big data. Great. But he still learned the rest of the cloud. So when we actually think of architecture careers, Michael, we're kind of a jack of all trades in terms of knowledge of how the systems work, not how to build them. But we typically are a master of one. So for me, my mastery in the technical architecture careers is networking. That's where I've spent most of my time. Sure, I've been designing clouds for the last 25 years. I'm very familiar with clouds. I've helped build them, design them, and consult the people that are actually building them my whole life. But I typically, networking is where I go for me. But, that's my love. At the same time, David is really an expert in application architecture and AI. And, if he and I were to work together, he'd say, Mike, go look at the network for me. I'm like, David, please look at the applications and the AI. And honestly, I've never done an architecture, at least at the global scale that I work, that didn't have an architecture team of 15 to 50 people on it. So, Michael, I want you to really think about it. Which do you think would get you a better outcome? One is trying to be the master of all technology, and I promise you it's not possible, but you're going to do the best you can anyway. Or know what you know, be really great at one thing, like the leading large people, having your fundamentals and things that you're good at. For you, it's data architecture. and then being able to build a team of, say, 15 to 50 people, get the network architects and the network engineers to give you their guidance, get the security architects and engineers to give you their guidance, get the identity and access management people to get you their guidance. Now get the AI and data scientist people to give you their guidance. You see where I'm coming from. And the real fact is, Michael, once you reach a big architect job, you're not going to be able to get too very technical yourself. I'm not even in a position where I could even look at the network anymore. I'm going to bring in a network architect, not because I don't know, but it's not, if I focus on the network, I'm going to lose focus of the big picture. So it's not, this is, you know, I hate to say it's not a technical role. David Lithicum said it's not a very technical role too, and it doesn't feel like a very technical role, but you still need to know the fundamentals. But I don't think you're going to have a hard time with the networking, Michael, with what you actually need.
Yeah. So, Michael, thank you, by the way, for answering my question. It gives me a lot better context in regards to what your hesitation is and why you seem to be have very little excitement when it comes to networking. And this is what I'm going to tell you. Your reaction to yesterday's workshop is not uncommon. It is not unusual. Anytime, most of us, we start off something that we have no to little understanding about things, they come across as overwhelming. They scare us. They make us believe that we don't have the capability, or rather the ability, to learn it, comprehend it, and perhaps even eventually explain, even at a high level, to others the information we have learned. Just know that is very normal. There was a time in my life when I felt exactly like you, and I've learned to suppress these type of feelings. I also know we have a lot of students that look at our program and they look at all the various live classes we have, and I believe we're either over or roughly at 800 hours of just on-demand content, including the recordings of the classes that you can watch. All of that is going to seem very overwhelming. But something that you need to already prime yourself for is that whenever you start something anew, just know you're always going to feel stupid. That is normal. And part of stupid feels you're overwhelmed.
Yep.
If you can mentally prepare yourself for this, and preparation when doing anything is very important, you know that it's just a phase that you have to go through. It's the same way when somebody learns any type of new skill. You know, when Mike was learning martial arts in the very beginning, I'm pretty sure he didn't feel like he's going to master this at any time. It seemed very awkward, right? You're trying to get the body movement right. So you just still don't have the muscle memory. You may not even have something as simple as the grip strength to do one little move. You have to build up to it. So it's the same thing with networking here, or with application information when it comes to anything cloud related, to the compute instances, to the databases, to the storage. But the key is understand it's just a phase. If you put your head down and you hustle and you have right training and the right support, because the mindset and mental support is very important, is you can manage it. But I'm going to tell you this, because a lot of people have wondered, if I'm not doing certifications, is there anything I can do? And let's say you haven't joined the program yet, and perhaps you will in a short time. This is what I'm going to tell you. There is about 4 books. 4 books that I will recommend. Even if you join the program, I will recommend these books. And these are more specific to networking. So the first book that I would recommend that you read is going to be from Jeff Doyle. And that's going to be TCP IP, or Routing TCP IP, Volume 1. So that's going to tackle basically your interior gateway routing protocols. A lot of gate graphics is going to get your whole way forward in learning some networking. Then what I would do is I would then pick up Volume 2 as well, because Volume 2 digs into BGP for you. Mm-hmm. So I would do that. Then the third book I would suggest you pick up is going to be the one we mentioned today and yesterday from Sam Halabi. That's going to be Internet Routing Architecture. And I think it's only the second edition you can get anywhere. And that one is going to be really great for you, because now you're going to go more into the visual aspects of things, the business use cases, and how actually some of these designs look like. And then to round it off, once you have that base foundation, Russ White has a fantastic book. It's called Optimal Routing Design. If you pick that up at the end, it goes a little bit more into the business aspects of it, but it covers basically all the different routing protocols from that perspective. So if you do nothing else, meaning you don't want to bother with certifications, but you genuinely just read those 4 books, you probably will even have the leg up on people that have spent years in the industry. And you can probably knock these books out in a matter of months, because you're not expected here to pass a test, right? You just want to get a certain amount of knowledge. So those will be 4 fantastic books that you can take your time in reading it. And you can do that in conjunction with learning all the different business skills that Mike already mentioned that are found within our program, or if you want to get that training somewhere else, that's up to you. But that is one way that you can eventually overcome this lack of excitement when it comes to networking or any topic, by the way, that you're going to be learning. So I'm going to put the book names in the chat as well for you here in a moment so that you have them. And then hopefully that's going to help you out a little bit. So let's do this.
And while you do that, Michael, you're a student. So if you desire to read that Routing TCP/IP Volume 1 from Jeff Doyle, which is a fantastic book, which I probably read about 8 times, I will tell you there's certain things that you can probably exclude out of that book for your work as a cloud architect, things related to the distance vector protocols. But the remaining things in that book are going to be so valuable. In fact, if I had someone that truly knew those 4 books, guess what? I'd prefer them far more than someone with a CCNP, because the CCNP won't have the knowledge that you'll get out of reading these 4 books.
Yeah, especially with Volume 1. The reason why I recommend Volume 1 was not for RIP or EIGRP. They're going to be in there, skip them. The nice thing about Volume 1, and you're going to get a little bit of a dose of that as well in Optimal Routing Design by Russ White, is it also goes into the actual, how do you design the IP addressing scheme for a network, which is going to be crucial. And it also shows you how they do their subnetting as well. So just to get a little bit of idea on how you can do that design, if you wanted to supplement already what you get within the program or with the free YouTube videos that we have as well. But these are basically the 4 that I would say is if you don't want to bother with certifications, but you want good networking knowledge. And just so you understand, aside from them being fantastic instructors and writers of all these 4 books, is what I love about them is if you go into cloud networking or cloud architecture, you're always going to be dealing with the what we call the layer 3 routing, or basically the IP layer or the IPv6 layer of the design aspect or the routing stack. And that's all you have really in the cloud. So these books specifically touch on that aspect. You don't have to worry about anything when it comes to spanning tree protocol. It helps if you know a little bit bridging, but again, you're not going to be touching any of the switches or the bridges or whatever you want to call, unless you're going to go out and start designing data centers. You might have a small aspect of it, let's say at the bottom end where you plug in any of the servers or end stations, anything like that. You might be running some type of spanning tree on there. But again, ask your engineer to put it together. That's going to be easy. Have them put it together, and then you design the rest of the actual topology. In the fundamental section that we have in the course, I actually broke down the CLO topology as well. That gives you an idea of, generally speaking, how we would be designing data centers so that we have equal cost multipathing, but as well as we can easily implement anything from OSPF to BGP if you wanted to design, let's say, a private type of cloud or private data center when it comes to these things. So, but take a look at that. And if you have any questions, Michael, just let me know. You know, if you're part of the program, I think Mike's mentioned you're part of the program, you can always just send me a Slack message and I'll give you a little bit more guidance on if you need anything else. But just know this is even for the architectural, this is overkill, but you will not have to read any other networking books really at that point. And you don't have to concern yourself, because Mike and I, we do love the RFC, the technical documents, we do love them. But if you don't want to go that deep into it, this will do it for you.
And to be fair, Michael, that's deeper than 98% of all the cloud architects would know. And you could get away with what's just in our program, Michael. But I agree with Mark. If you want to know networking better, these are the books to read.
Yep, this is just a solution to not taking certifications, getting you over the hump. You don't have to read any additional books. These 4 will cover anything and everything you would want to know outside of switching, and you should be good to go. If you end up going into a position where you really have to deal hands-on in a private data center, just be prepared. There's going to be some additional things that you will need to know. But for cloud architecture, my goodness, overkill is an understatement probably for it. But just take a look at it, Michael, if you need some supplementation. Let's put it that way. Okay, let's go on. See if we have any further questions. And this is from Freedom Lands. They're wondering, why would a company hire a cloud architect with no certifications?
So Freedom Lands, I have a question for you. I now run a business. Do I earn more money because you're certified? No. My business earns more money if you can do your job and you can do it well. That's the real issue. So let me give you an example. Let's say you've done the AWS Solutions Architect Professional, the AWS DevOps Professional, and now you're applying for a job. What have you learned? You've learned how to configure AWS things. You've learned the names of the AWS services and how to configure those things. And you've now learned how to do all these DevOps things. And you know which one of those you're going to be using in your job? 0, not 1% of it. And here's the reason. I need you to first know that 98% of all enterprises are multi-cloud and 89% of all businesses are multi-cloud. So I'm much more concerned that you know not to use Dynamo database or Amazon Aurora or Amazon's proprietary DevOps tools. I need you to know to remove at least 50 to plus % of that. And I need you to know the network in the data center and how to design it. Secondly, here's what happens. Now you're on an interview and you've done all these certifications. So I've got someone that's great certifications and I say, oh, great. I see you have this AWS Advanced Networking. Could you talk to me about the BGP messages and the BGP finite state machine? And yes, they have an AWS Advanced Networking, but they don't cover this. But I need you to know this in the job. And then I say to you, how would you quantify an organization's cybersecurity risk so you can get them to invest in what they need to? And you have the AWS Advanced Security too, which taught you how to use some proprietary AWS things which typically don't fit in enterprise security and why we have used enterprise security tools anyway. But there's no security in that, so you're not going to understand how to calculate the annual loss expectancy, etc. You're not going to know anything about risk management. Then I'm going to ask you, how would you design your demilitarized zone for this? And you're still not going to know because in all these certifications you haven't been taught. And then I'm going to ask you, tell me about what goes on responding to an RFI, RFP, RFQ. And that person with all their certifications isn't even going to know what it is. And then I'm going to bring in something related to that person's cost of capital and how you would use that information to calculate the cost of building or renting a private data center versus the cloud or leasing the gear. And the person's still not going to know. The key is that these certifications have 0 to do with architecture. They have everything to do with systems administration. So I'm going to ask you this. Let's say Freedom Land, somebody came to me and they had a law degree. It was from a very respectable school, say Princeton or something like that. And now they say, Mike, I am here for the job as an airline captain. And I say, okay, do you have a pilot's license? No, I have a law degree. Have you ever flown an airplane? No, but I know I can because I got a law degree. That's the problem we face, is the certifications have literally nothing to do with what we do as architects. The only certification where people learn architecture is the CCDE. Why? In this exam where you're given a business and technical problem, you have to design an architecture, you have to present it back to the client, you have to convince the client why they need to buy it. Meanwhile, the client's going to be interrogating you on the decisions you made and the rationale behind them. That would help you. Now let's talk about TOGAF, which I love. TOGAF doesn't teach you how to be an architect. It has nothing to do with it, teaching you how to become an enterprise architect. It's teaching you what should you do first, second, third, and fourth along the way. What would be the steps? But it doesn't teach you how to do that steps. That's why we train people to be an enterprise architect in addition to their certifications. So that's why nobody cares about your certifications. Now, if you have a CCIE certification, they are going to want to talk to you and it's going to help you. And here's the reason why. And I'll give you your best certifications that are going to get you more interviews in a minute. The CCIE, everybody knows the following. They know that it's near impossible to pass. And because it's near impossible to pass, you've got to work harder than anything you've ever done in your life. I learned to practice medicine. I did a CCIE. The CCIE was harder. So they know that, which means they know that you're going to run into a challenge. You're going to be willing to go way above and beyond what most people did. You've got a thirst for knowledge, and you want to be the best. That's what I want to hire. So for the CCIE, I usually hire people not for the fact they passed the CCIE exam. I don't care about that. It's the characteristics of somebody that's willing to pass the CCIE. It's the same characteristics I'm going to see in a Navy SEAL. The people that would just go above and beyond and not quit. Again, that's going to bring people in. Now, there are certifications that I like. The CCIE and CCDP teach you a lot about the tech. The CISSP is an extremely good certification, and when I see it as a hiring manager, I want to talk to the person. Because again, it's big, it's challenging. Most people have never done it. It's beyond what so that looks good for me. I actually like the CCSP and the CISM alongside the CISSP, because if I've got someone with those three, they have 30% of the knowledge they actually need, maybe 40% for a good architecture career. So again, I'm willing to look at that. If I have someone that's done like something else that's big and high profile, great. TOGAF 10 is big and high profile. Everybody knows what it is, and 80% of the biggest companies in the world are actually using TOGAF as their enterprise architecture framework. So again, it's there. The key here is the certifications with the irrelevance, SysOps, development, all of that other stuff. But I don't care if somebody's certified. So here's what hiring managers care about. Can you do the job? First, do they trust you? Second, do they like you? Are you energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate about for the work? Are you willing to go above and beyond? Are you a good team player? And do you have the emotional intelligence to improve things on my team versus creating conflict? That I care about. Your certifications. Go take a certification to the bank and try to get a mortgage with it. And it reminds me of this guy. I'm going to call him T. And I'm going to describe T to you. So at one point I took a job. I only had 6 months experience. They wanted 15 years experience, but I did good on the interview. And there was this guy T that I worked with. T did not have a single certification known to man. Some days T would even forget to shower. And T was the best network engineer I've ever seen. He was great at networking. He could figure things out in a jiffy. He could troubleshoot any problem. And he was even good enough with things outside of his career, like Linux, that he could actually log into the routers every day, back up their configurations. He'd be able to write a little Linux script to parse through the logs to try to find problems. This guy was amazing. He was like the perfect network engineer, not a single certification. He was getting about $250,000 a year back in 1999, though, because his skills were so good, which is about $600,000 in today's world, because he was that good, not a single certification. So it depends where you focus your time. Do you focus your time on certifications? Do you focus your time on excellence? I prefer someone that focuses their time on excellence. And if they happen to do 2 or 3 perfect certifications, I like that. Why do I like it? Because managers are going to see that and they're going to be more likely to interview them. But certifications don't get you hired. They get you an interview. Your knowledge and training is what gets you hired. So if you've got a way to go interview with someone, maybe you're real creative and you reach out to a lot of recruiters, have a lot of recruiters, and convince a recruiter to send you the hiring manager, and you're awesome, you're getting hired. Your certifications don't even come into play at that point. But I still recommend you do them to be able to look good for your brand to get more interviews.
So the first thing I'm going to tell you, Freedom Lands, is join tomorrow's webinar and discussion between Mike and Russ White. That is also going to explain to you why companies in general would hire architects of any type without certifications, and you'll see exactly why tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I want to give you my own little story here. So at some point I was working with somebody, and they were doing more the hands-on type of troubleshooting. And I got a message asking for help. So I'm like, okay, I got some time. Let me go help. I don't mind getting a little my hands dirty every so often. It's fun. And make a long story short here is they were logging into a switch. And I was thinking, okay, maybe it's an issue with the design. Maybe they don't understand multiple instance spanning tree. I thought something a little bit out of the norm that people don't always see. And I got this question from this person that says, like, so I'm logged into this Juniper switch now. How do I check if the customer's having trouble. And I'm like, what? Wait, hold on a second. You're asking me to tell you how to troubleshoot this? He goes like, well, yeah, I'm not 100% sure as to, what I would have to be looking for. And I go like, well, wait a second. You have your CCNA, don't you? By the way, this is my inside voice. So I asked them, it's a switch, right? They go like, yeah. What does a switch learn? And they're like, let me think. After about 30 seconds, I said, man, MAC addresses. It learns MAC addresses. You should have learned this in your CCNA. Why am I telling you if a switch learns MAC address and what you should be checking to see if there's any connected devices? The reason I tell you this story, and by the way, this is a true story, and it stuck with me, is that even though somebody has a certification, that doesn't really tell you that they learned something for real. Now, as hiring managers, the person that might be interviewing you, we many times make the assumptions, if we're familiar with the certification, that you should have that knowledge, that you should have an understanding of what is being taught in there. But my own personal experience, I've seen way too many times that just because somebody has a license, has a certification, has this plaque or this piece of paper, whatever name you want to attach to it, does not mean that they're capable of actually doing the job. So why would companies hire people with no certifications? Because even with certifications, it doesn't always guarantee that they're going to hit the jackpot with a person that is going to be competent at that job. So, and I give you another reason. What if you don't have any certifications? Would you want to be excluded from the interview process simply because you don't have them?
Yeah.
I don't know. If I don't have something, I don't want to be excluded because maybe I know how to do the job. Maybe I have the experience to do it. Maybe I just, like we spoke earlier with Michael, maybe I just decided I don't want to do a certification. I'm just going to hit the books, read it, draw it out. If I need hands-on, I learn it that way as well. What if I'm that one? Do I want to be excluded from getting the job because somebody is so stuck on a piece of paper? That's one of the issues we were running in, of course, with the college degrees too. Right, where people didn't even want to talk to you because you didn't have a bachelor's, or let's say even an associate's. It's nonsense, especially in tech. Unless you go far up and high enough, that's maybe where I'll give you a little bit of wiggle room where I say, okay, if you're truly dealing at this high echelon level and you need to be like a CEO or a CFO or something like that, okay, maybe having a master's in business administration, your MBA, might be at least something that I want you to have so that I can have somewhat of an inkling if you know business. But enterprise architect, anything architecture-wise, is that going to be important? No. I can ascertain that by just talking to you. I'd rather spend an hour with you talking about it than make assumptions because of some piece of paper. So just give you that.
I want to go back.
Go ahead,
and Russ White and I are going to talk tomorrow. And when we talk about the evolution of the architecture careers and the evolution of the tech careers and why, you're going to see that at one point certifications were very valuable in what they did. And you'll see how now the certifications have become close to meaningless in many cases. Still help you get an interview. And the reason why is they're teaching things that are not related to the job. If you look at a cloud provider certification, it's more of a marketing, here, buy my stuff, get excited about my stuff. It's actually not teaching you how to do architecture. So there's that. The other things that have happened is things like AWS free exam retakes. When they do them, by enabling you to take the test, fail it, learn what the test is, and then take it a couple of weeks later without paying for it, they're increasing the pass rate. At the same time, I literally get, and I've been teaching architecture for 25 years, every day someone's trying to give me, here, you can pass this certification exam without even showing up. Where I get other things that say, here's the answer key for the exam for $25. And I can tell you certain sites on the internet that are actually selling copies of the exam. So it's very easy to do that. Now, if I see too many certifications for an architect, I get worried. Like if I see 3 or 4, good. But when I see 6, 7, and 8, 9, I don't even want to interview them. And the reason I'm not going to interview them is as follows. they're trying to spread themselves across different careers. Now, if it's all in the same career, if I see a CISSP, a CISM, a CCSP, and not that I would get the CCSK, but if I see the CCSK, it's all aligned. Good. I'm good with that. But when I see a developer certification, and then a SysOps or maintenance certification, and I see a Linux certification, and then I see a DevOps certification, I start to say, is that this person's an engineer, which means they focus their time on engineering, which means they're not going to know how to design systems to optimize business performance. They're going to know how to build them. And that's the key. The end outcome is a business outcome. It's a business focus. So I hope that helps.
All right, let us move on to our next question here. And this is from Isaac. So just so everybody knows, because we don't have to pull it up, but Isaac is going to be interviewing for a network engineering position. So he's wondering, Mike, I know you have a lot of experience with interviews. I have my first tech interview, network engineering, tomorrow. I was hoping you can share some advice with me.
Isaac, absolutely. So I want to get this clear. This is what the hiring manager wants to know, that you can do the job, that they can trust you. Most interviews die on the trust stage, about 95% of them. The next thing they want to know is, do you know what you know and know what you don't know? That is especially critical. Make the wrong change on a router, break down the entire network. They care about your energy, enthusiasm, and passion for the job because they want someone that loves it. They care about your emotional intelligence. They're going to care about your likability, how good you work in a team, and how hard you'll work if and when it comes down to it. So I need you to know that first. And I'm going to give you some guidance first, then I'm going to give you a couple of questions I would ask a network engineer, and I'm going to give Mark a couple sample questions, and I'll tell you what we're looking for in these questions. So when I'm looking for someone's knowledge as an engineer is the ability to understand how things work. And I'm going to be questioning you on how things work, because I know the configuration is nothing. It's easy to learn if you know what to do, but I need that. So the first piece of advice I'm going to give you is do not bluff on your interview. If the interviewer asks you, what do you know best? Tell them what you know best. Do not tell them what you think you know best. Because Isaac, I'll tell you, I interview people, and I look at their resume, which guides my questions, and I also ask them, what do you know best? I know BGP best. Okay, let's talk about the BGP finite state machine. What happens at what phase? And they go, huh? And I'd say, tell me about how BGP selects a path. How would you load share across these things? Huh? What kind of BGP security best practices should I use to make sure that we're not getting bad routes injected? And the people go, huh? So that's the key. So don't point me to something that you don't know well. The next thing is don't lie to me. Now, I'm going to make this very simple. I know it sounds crazy, but 95% of the people that I've interviewed have lied to me in terms of what they know. So if I were to ask you a question, and this was actually the question that got me hired on my first job by Devendra in New Jersey with MCL WorldCom, which is now Verizon. Devendra asked me a question that I knew first, which was BGP. He loved it. He asked me a question on OSPF. He loved my response. And then he asked me a question on EIGRP. I hate proprietary stuff. I always have. I hate technical debt that it brings. And I said, Devendra, I'm sorry. I've just not had the opportunity to work with EIGRP yet. But I'm highly energetic. I'm highly enthusiastic, and I love technology. I said, Devendra, I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, and I can find the answers to things quickly. If you want to check my competency, let's talk about BGP some more, OSPF or intermediate systems to intermediate systems, and let's talk about IP multicast, PIM sparse mode, PIM dense mode, PIM sparse dense mode, DVMRP or IGMP. Two things actually happen. At that point, it was my first interview. Devendra sticks out his hand and says, I'm going to hire you. And then he says, well, you applied for the wrong job. You applied to be a network engineer, but that's not good enough. You're a senior network engineer. It was my first tech job. 3 months later, I was the lead architect. And 6 months later, I was on Wall Street as a senior architect. But what was it that I told him? Well, Devendra had been lied to all day, every day for the last 3 months. And I was the first person that answered good questions on the things that I knew. And when I didn't know something, I did the following. I don't know, Devendra, which showed him I know what I know and I know what I don't know. Then I said, I'm highly energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate about technology. I showed him I was part of what he was looking for. Then I said, if it was important to you, I'd stay up all night, read 1,000 pages a day until I was the best EIGRP person on your team. Ding, ding, ding. Mike's willing to go above and beyond that he's a team player. And if you'd like to check my competency, let's talk about this, this, and this. Now, why did I do that, Isaac? When I pointed this, this, and this, they were the things that I knew best. So I guided Devendra to give me these questions. And then that's what I did, why I did it, and how I did it. And you want to be able to take control of the interview. So there is that. The next thing that I'm going to tell you is make sure you understand the question. And in many cases, I'm going to give you a question that may need you to ask another question to make it work. And maybe we'll give you an example of that. So don't assume you have all the information. Feel free to ask. So if Mark says to me, what type of LSAs exist in OSPF Area 0, I'm going to confirm it. And it's going to do a couple things, and I'll show you why. Mark, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. Are you looking for the type of LSAs that exist in each area? Is that the same question?
I'm actually just looking for the LSA that exists within the backbone area. And then just to give you an idea, I'm going to swap sides quickly with Mike, because I don't know if he was going to ask me that question. But let's say I was sitting on an interview and somebody posed me that question, and then they came back and they said, okay, I want to know about the backbone. My next question would be, are we running a kind of like broadcast / multi-access type of network, meaning Ethernet, or are we going to be running more of a point-to-point type of system?
Yep.
Simply by me asking that question, if that person has any knowledge about it, let's say they weren't just HR asking me some cookie cutter question, but let's say this is the actual technical lead that's going to ask me that question. What that's immediately going to tell them is that I'm trying to figure out, do I need to tell them about the network LSA, the LSA 2, the one that I'm going to use and then have the 2 different broadcast addresses for the OSPF? They're going to understand that I'm asking them about it. Because if they tell me, no, this is just going to be simply point-to-point networks. Oh, okay, well, then I don't need to worry about it. I don't need to tell you about the 2 different multicast addresses that OSPF uses. I just have to focus on the one. And then now I can focus on, well, generally speaking, just in the backbone, I'm going to look at the router LSA, which is going to provide me some topology information, including reachability information when it comes to my OSPF domain. And depending if I have additional areas that might be attached to it, I might have this summary LSA that eventually is going to tell me if there's going to be an area border router and other areas that I may have to go towards. So I'm kind of mixing a link state kind of routing protocol with a distant vector routing protocol because of how the calculations work. Now, if you give an answer like that, how many more questions do you think they're going to ask you?
No more tech questions.
You're done.
It's done. Now it's who are you? It's do we like you? So what we're looking for is to get what is your thinking pattern? What do you know? And, it could be a trick question. Like Devendra says to me, Mike, what's the IP multicast address for OSPF? And I said, which multicast address are you looking for? Are you looking for all SPF routers, which is 224.0.0.5? Or are you looking for designated routers and backup designated routers, which is 224.0.0.6? So what could you tell me which one you look for? And Devendra's like, okay, I like this. He wanted to know that I knew the protocol. And that was the key. Devendra asked me first why we would use BGP. And he wanted my rationale. And then he asked me a question. Okay, we're an internet service provider. We're going to have a peering point with 5 other ISPs right over here. And in those days, that was a lot. And what would we need to do? How do we not become a transit AS? What kind of things could we use to make sure we don't get bad routes? We could do this. And that was what he was looking for. So for an engineer, I'm looking for that. Now, for an admin, they're more of a technician. I'm looking for their ability to basically be able to do it. But at the engineering level, I'm looking for that, which actually probably should talk about why most people don't make it on an engineering interview. So we're looking for that.
Before you keep going, may I just add one thing for Isaac?
Yeah.
So Isaac, I also want to let you know is it depends also what your primary task is going to be as the engineer. Just so you understand, there's engineers that are going to be solely responsible for implementation. So that's going to be their job. So basic implementation, maybe you do some move, add, and changes, maybe basically based on some orders or some requests you're going to be doing. There, the interview is going to be a little bit different than compared to, let's say, that you're going to be more the troubleshooting type of engineer. With troubleshooting, guess what? I want to know your thinking. And I want to hear out loud, what is your thinking pattern? What kind of questions are you going to ask me to get to a certain solutions? Now, there's also engineers that are, they're not on the sales side of things, but they still deal with the design aspects, meaning they'll need to understand the overall design aspect of a particular solution, and then they might do the implementation. In that type of scenario, that interview is going to be more focused on your comprehension and understanding of various designs that you might have. Depending on what type of company you work for, either you could be part of a managed service provider that provides particular templated type of solutions, so you'll need to understand what those nuances are of those. Or if you're just working for another company that just comes up with different kind of enclaves, we call them zones, with some type of modularity in the systems, you'll have to understand how that modularity fits into the overall design. That type of discussion is going to be very different than when I want to hear about if there's an issue with the way the link state updates are being propagated across the domain. What are some of the ways that you might start troubleshooting it? So I just want you to understand is if we knew exactly what type of primary role as an engineer you play, then it's going to be more tailored, our response to it. Just want to add that to the point.
Yeah, and what I was trying to demonstrate, and then Mark gave you some really good advice, but before he did, Mark asked me one question, and I gave him an answer, is this what you want? And I intentionally gave him something that was slightly wrong. And the reason is, Isaac, I will tell you in most of the interviews that I've performed over my life, people answer a question that's not even related to the real question. It's like watching a politician. What's your plan on this? And then they start talking about something that's totally unrelated. So that was the point. And that's why I wanted to show you've got to get the right information. So it's that. But it's have some degree of confidence, but don't be arrogant. I will tell you to look at the interviewer. If you're talking and they ask the question, you're talking and they're leaning forward and nodding, this is great. If they start looking like this, just change the topic or end it or finish it pretty quickly. They don't like what they're hearing. Be honest about what you know. You can take Mark and I, we're both CCIEs. I'm going to make it very clear. I know really scary critical routing stuff, like how you would design one of the biggest cloud providers, how you would design an internet service provider that's global. That's my world. How do you design these mission critical things from a routing perspective, from a high availability perspective? You know what I never had to work with? Wireless, Isaac. And I brought in wireless people. And when I was on one of the most strategic the most strategic voice projects at all of Cisco with one of the largest banks, I didn't know video. And so what I actually did is there. So Isaac, they're going to ask you a lot of questions that will typically be in an implementation job, but they're going to be asking you how the technology works anyway. And the reason is you can always go to a configuration guide and learn what to configure. But you need to know what to configure and why it's being configured. And when somebody else gives you something and it tells you to do this, do you know how to do it exactly right? Do you know how to look it up every single time? And I would also say, make sure you're getting good at reading documentation and let people know you're reading the documentation, because I'm never going to do something without reading the documentation. Because 5 minutes of reading documentation will save 5 hours of troubleshooting. So even an implementation engineer, I'm looking for the person to do the research ahead of time, to do the preparation ahead of time, to know the commands they're actually going to need. Potentially even to go into EVNG software, mock it up and actually test it and make sure it's going to work. And then build the configuration, so all you've got to do is just cut and paste it in. I might do something like that. And in fact, I never worked as an implementation engineer. My first job was kind of in that mid, cross between strategy and the implementation. And they called it, I was in that in-between team, was my first job. And I'll tell you, most of the cases that I got brought into was troubleshooting the people in the junior implementation roles that didn't prep ahead of time. They didn't know what they were configuring and why. And it was going in and trying to figure out and debug and troubleshoot. So if you understand how the stuff works and you're not getting something to come up and your WAN link is not coming up, you'll know why. When you look at something and it says up, line protocol up, and interface up, great. But if the interface is up and the line protocol is down, are you thinking encapsulation or other things? So we're kind of looking for it, trying to make sure that you get all these things in the big picture. But I wish you really great luck on it. Let us know how we can help. Network engineering is a wonderful job and a critically important job. So without the network, nothing works. Good luck on the interview. Let us know how you're doing.
Yep. And just remember, and if you're going to do anything implementation related, from what I'm reading, is they want to know if you understand how the pieces are eventually going to fit together in regards to the overall aspect. And what I mean with that is, let's see, what would be an easy way to give you this idea? So let's say you have to configure let's go very simple. Customer requests a new VLAN because they need it for some reason, some new department, anything came up. They might just want to know from you, do you understand that if I'm adding a VLAN and if I have multiple switches there, that I do have to perhaps add that VLAN to my trunk port, so that eventually from my trunk port, it can go towards my, let's say, distribution or core switch. And then from that perspective, it can go out to the different zones. If this is going to be my internet edge zone towards my internet gateway, fine. If it's going to go towards my, let's say, my data center zone, do you understand that you need to build that overall spanning tree topology towards that piece of the network? So those are little things for implementation that they're going to look from you to see if you understand what the actual steps are of putting all the little pieces together. I would actually not be very surprised if you get questions very similar to what me and Mike got somewhat of a CCIE exam, where they're just going to give you an explanation of what the customer is asking for, which is going to be very vague. And then you have to extrapolate that, hey, they want a VLAN, and that VLAN has to be actually spread across 2, 3, 4 switches. They're not going to tell you that, but they're just going to tell you this is what the customer asked for. And then they're going to look from you. Do you understand that part? Are you going to ask some clarifying questions, not necessarily the answer to the overall solution, but rather if there's some missing pieces? Like if they ask you, yeah, we need to add a VLAN to it. Perhaps you're going to ask, does this VLAN, is this local to just a switch? Does it need to span across multiple switches? Do we have to add any type of protection on the port itself? Is our device is going to be plugged into this or another switch? That way you also show them, oh, okay, this person is thinking about the fact that if we're plugging in another switch, this is not just going to be one of those edge ports, right? There we need some additional protection, maybe against somebody just plugging in rogue devices and things like that. So kind of that type of thinking you'll need from that perspective. All right. And I'll tell you what, let's take one more question, Mike. We'll kind of fill it off, and then we'll wrap it up for today so that it gives everybody a little bit of break so they can come back tomorrow as well for the interview, the webinar discussion with Russ White, and then eventually the actual webinar at 7 p.m. on how to get your first architect job. So Tyrone?
Sounds good. We're gonna try to answer this on time though, because I've got a critical meeting right after.
Correct.
So from Cloud Doctor, how can one develop the skills in communication, stakeholder management, and strategic thinking for the cloud architect role? So Cloud Doctor, you know what humans are born with? No knowledge of how to do anything. Even a cat, when it's born, has the instincts, but humans don't until we're taught. But the good news is, even though cats are super smart, but we can learn. It can ideally, in most cases, more than the cat. But that's neither here nor there. So what is the implications of this? It means nobody was born an airplane pilot. It means nobody was born a lawyer. It means nobody was born a physician, and nobody was born a cloud architect. So Cloud Doctor, you've got lots of ways you can develop these skills in communication. You could take it with our course, and you'll get what you need. And that's going to be by far the cheapest to get your communication skills, your stakeholder management skills, your strategic thinking, and everything else. Alternatively, you can do what I did. So what I did is I went and got an MBA. I actually did 2 of them, but one was 3/4 of the way and the other one was a full MBA. And then after that, I got training in leadership. I got training in sales. I got training in executive presence. I got training in CXO relevancy. I got trained on executive presentations. I got trained on stage presence, where the company sent me to learn from actors about how to take up more space on stage and time so I'd be seen as a more powerful leader. And I got training on all that. Now, I was going to tell you, that TRAS was about $60,000 or so for my MBA, and then another $100,000 of customized training. But you can do it. There's a company called Speakeasy in San Francisco. You want to spend a week or 2 with them, you will get very good communication skills. Of course, 2 weeks with them is going to be $7,000 or $8,000, but you're going to learn something where our course is less than 1,500 on the sale. So, but that's an option. But that's just one set of thing. Now, stakeholder management, we're not born knowing how to do this. And this isn't the kind of thing that you're just going to learn in a book. This is the kind of thing that you need to be taught. You need to see somebody do it. You need to see the kind of questions they would ask and how they do it. So you need to get training for these things. Strategic thinking, well, that takes all kinds of things. I was working with my students on it for hours last night. And those are the kind of things that I would be talking about. So this is what I'm actually looking for, the skills in the person. So you have to just go get it. And that's where people go wrong, Cloud Doctor, is they think that they can just learn these skills on a job, but I can't hire someone that I have to train for an executive role. I could hire a technician and train them on the job, but not for an executive role. Not that any company would really waste money to hire someone without skills in a world where they could hire someone with skills or use AI instead of hiring people without skills. So there's that. So just get the training and you'll be good to go.
Yeah,
I'm going to answer a quick question.
Yeah, I was going to bring that question up from Isaac just briefly before we wrap up. So they're wondering, number one, they're actually appreciating the advice that we gave them. And they're wondering, how would you recommend handling questions about job experience when I don't have any?
So I don't care about your experience. I care about your company. That's the real issue. So one of two things happens. So Isaac, if I'm willing to interview you, I'm willing to hire you.
Correct.
Otherwise, I wouldn't waste my time interviewing you. So there's a willingness for me to interview you. Now, what happens is how well you actually answer that in the question. So if I ask you a question and you answer it like a rock star, I don't care about your experience. I'm not even going to ask you. And that's really the key. So show me how good you are. Show me you present well. Show me you can answer questions. By the way, answer questions of what is the tech, how does the tech work, and why should we use it? Frame it so people can understand your thinking. But I don't care. I care about your capabilities. So show me your capabilities. Show me your thinking. Show me you're smart. Show me you're energetic, enthusiastic, and motivated. And if someone asks about your job, say, I do lack an experience. But what I lack in experience, I make up for with energy, enthusiasm, and passion. Let me tell you about my journey. I didn't just come here. I didn't just take a certification. These are all the books I've read. If you're an engineer, so you got to be building stuff. So I have my own ENJ server. And in this environment, I create environments of 30 and 40 routers with multiple routing protocols with route redistribution and QoS policies. And I've been getting my hands dirty. Now, that's because you're an engineer, not an architect. But you start talking about that and they say, tell me about your experience building things. And I don't need a Git thing on your resume. I don't want to see that. You already got the interview. So now tell them what you can do. Show them what you've actually done and show them that your capabilities. I don't care about it. I'll give you an example. The first guy I ever hired was Shanur. And in this case, he did not have the skills, but he was the best. He had a great energy, enthusiasm, passion for the job. I just loved the guy when I interviewed him, and I told my manager we needed to hire Shanur. Shanur had a 17-year career there and became a CEO of a business, bringing computational power and computing to the developing nations. So proud of him. But that's a particular answer because he did a really good job. I'll give you another example. A student of mine, his name was Nafuli. He's in Manchester. He was in the little outskirts of London when he came to us. Nafuli got his first job as a chief technology officer, his first tech job ever. Nafuli is awesome. He had great skills, but it was the competency they cared about, and he proved it. It's the way Delroy Back got his first architect job at CDW right after our training. It's the way so many people get their job. Be great. Jennifer, who went to JP Morgan Chase, who was a mental health tech for that. Just be great. Show me that you are smart. Show me that you are fungible. Show me you'll go way above. Show me you know what you know and don't know, and don't try to lie to me. You do that, and you actually have the skills and knowledge to get the job, you'll do well. And if not, go find the skills and knowledge that you felt you were lacking in, or get somebody to help you with it, and you'll do well next time. You'll do great, though. Apologies for not having any extra time. I would have loved to have gotten Mark's perspective. I was trying to answer those two before
That's
this
okay.
meeting that I needed to get to. So I want to drive on everybody. Tomorrow night, we've got a webinar at 7 p.m. on how to become a cloud architect. Please attend. You can ask questions about any of these other careers. I don't mind. I'm just always happy to help, and it's live on Zoom. And also, don't miss Russ White tomorrow. Anytime Russ comes around, there's always going to be something that we can all learn from, including me. So keep him around, come around tomorrow. And we've got a full CCNA curriculum sitting on our website or our YouTube channel. Yesterday we released day 1. Today we released day 2. And tomorrow we'll release day 3, about 30 hours of training, and it's all free. So take care, everyone. And give me a hashtag cloud architect, network architect, AI architect, or whatever it is, so I know you are here. If you haven't liked the video, please give it a like. Subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content so you can get more content to help you in your career. Take care, everyone.
Goodbye, all.